The fog hung heavier than ever, thick tendrils weaving through the skeletal branches of the marsh trees, shrouding the world in a damp, oppressive silence interrupted only by the occasional snap of a twig or the distant, eerie echo of footsteps that seemed to come from nowhere. Our group, once tentative but hopeful, now trudged forward with a growing sense of unease gnawing at each step. I could feel the weight of the marsh pressing in on us, not just physically but mentally, fraying the fragile bonds that kept us together. Mark, as usual, took the lead. His broad shoulders cut through the mist like a beacon of stubborn certainty. "It's just your imagination," he snapped at Lena when she hesitated, her small frame trembling slightly as she clutched her notebook close. "There's nothing supernatural out here. We're just lost and tired." But the marsh had a voice of its own, and it whispered in ways that no amount of rational thinking could dismiss. I watched as Lena's wide eyes darted nervously at the shadows, and Sarah, always the skeptic, lowered her camera with a tightening jaw. Tom tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but even his usual joviality sounded hollow in the damp air. We were walking along a narrow, uneven path when Mark's foot suddenly caught. A hidden root, slick and camouflaged by the moss and mud, snagged his boot, and with a sudden grunt, he twisted sharply, collapsing to one knee with a sharp cry of pain. "Mark," I called out, rushing to his side as the others skidded to a halt. He grimaced, clutching his ankle, which had swollen quickly, the skin flushed with bruising already forming. "Damn it," he muttered through gritted teeth. "It's nothing. I can keep going." But the look in his eyes betrayed him pain and frustration mingled in equal measure. We had no choice but to slow down, to tend to his injury. I knelt beside him, pressing my hands gently against the swollen ankle, trying to keep calm despite the unease crawling beneath my skin. "We need to rest," I said firmly. "Pushing forward now is reckless." Mark shot me a sharp look, but said nothing. His pride was wounded more than his ankle. The group clustered close, the fog swallowing us whole as the muffled footsteps began again closer. This time, more deliberate, yet no figure emerged from the swirling grey. "It's just animals," Mark insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Lena shook her head, eyes wide. "Those footsteps aren't right. They don't sound like any creature I've heard." "You think it's the Lantern Man?" Claire whispered, clutching Lena's arm. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the name, the legend, the chilling possibility. "We can't afford to let fear tear us apart," I said, trying to steady my own trembling voice. "We need a plan." The group's tension snapped like a brittle branch. Voices rose, accusations and doubts weaving through the marsh air. Mark accused Lena and Sarah of feeding superstition. Lena retorted that Mark's stubborn denial was blinding him to the truth. Tom's attempts to interject with humor fell flat, his usual ease replaced by a worn exhaustion. As the argument spiraled, the footsteps grew louder, echoing around us in the fog's embrace, each step a reminder that we were being hunted by something unseen, something ancient and merciless. Fear clenched my heart. The marsh was no longer just a treacherous terrain. It was a predator, and we were its prey. I knew then that the fragile leadership we'd had was crumbling. I had to be the one to keep us together, to make decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. Mark's injury forced us to slow, to be cautious, but it also gave the Lantern Man more time to stalk us. "Listen," I said, raising my voice over the rising panic. "We move slowly, carefully. No rash decisions. We stick together. Mark, you lean on me. We watch the light, and we watch the shadows." His face softened, the fire in his eyes tempered by pain and grudging acceptance. The marsh seemed to close in tighter, the unnatural footsteps now circling us, their cadence irregular but unmistakably deliberate. I felt the cold fingers of dread creep along my spine, but I pushed it down, focusing on the faces around me, friends, allies against an enemy none of us fully understood. The night was far from over, and the fractures in our fragile group were only beginning to show. But one thing was clear. Survival depended on more than just strength or skepticism, demanded trust, resilience, and the courage to face the shadows lurking just beyond the lantern's flickering glow. As I glanced toward the faint, wavering light ahead, a shiver ran through me. The lantern man was watching, waiting, and leading us deeper into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. And yet, we had no choice but to follow. The fog closed in around us like a living thing, thick and suffocating, swallowing the world beyond a few feet. Every breath tasted damp and heavy, and the chill seeped into my bones despite my layered clothing. Our footsteps, once steady and sure, now sounded muffled and uncertain, as though the marsh itself was swallowing our passage. The faint glow of the lantern man's light pulsed ahead, an eerie beacon that seemed at odds with the oppressive blackness swallowing the rest of the landscape. I kept my eyes fixed on that wavering glow, feeling its unnatural brightness cut through the fog like a blade. Yet, instead of offering comfort, the light seemed to distort the marsh around us. Twisted shapes writhed in the periphery, shadows stretching and bending in impossible ways. The reeds looked gnarled, their silhouettes grotesque against the lantern's sickly glow. Each flicker of the light revealed new, unsettling forms. A crouched figure made of blackened vines, a twisted tree stump with limbs like grasping hands, a dark shape that might have been a person or something far worse. Beside me, Lena crouched low, her fingers tracing strange patterns in the mud and reeds. Her notebook lay open on her lap, pages fluttering in the damp breeze. "These shapes," she whispered. "They match the old tales creatures born from the marsh's sorrow and pain, shadows that mimic lost souls. The lantern man, he doesn't just lead us, he binds us to this place." Her voice was a fragile thread of calm amid the growing panic. I wanted to believe her, to hold on to the flicker of hope she offered, but the footsteps, those relentless, wet, sloshing sounds, were growing louder behind us. They no longer belonged to any of us. The air was thick with tension, every rustle and snap setting our nerves on edge. Sarah struggled to keep her camera steady, even as her hands trembled. "I've got something," she murmured, eyes wide behind the dim glow of her flashlight. Movement just beyond the light. "Something's there, but it's not human." I glanced over her shoulder, catching sight of a shadow shifting in the mist. It was indistinct, a flicker of darkness that melted into the fog as soon as I tried to focus on it. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, and I swallowed down a rising tide of fear. Mark's voice cut through the haze, rough and tense. "We need to keep moving. Standing still only makes us easier to catch." Tom, usually our buffer against despair, was silent now, his usual smiles replaced by a tight-lipped grimace. Even he looked worn, the weight of the marsh pressing down on him. I felt the familiar knot of doubt twist inside me, but I pushed it aside. "Stay close," I said, voice firm despite the shaking in my chest. "Keep the light ahead in sight. We'll get through this." The footsteps hastened, wet and heavy, sloshing through the mud behind us. The marsh seemed to contract, closing in with every step. The lantern man's light pulsed brighter, its flickering glow casting monstrous shadows that danced and snarled across the reeds. I led the group onward, every sense alert. The fog was a veil of white silence, broken only by the sounds of our breath, the squelch of boots in mud, and the haunting footsteps that echoed too close for comfort. The marsh was no longer just a landscape. It was an active predator, and we were its prey. Lena's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts again. "We have to remember the stories," she urged. "The Lantern Man feeds on fear, on despair. If we hold on to hope, if we don't let him see us break, maybe we can survive." Hope felt fragile, like the flickering flame of the lantern itself, but it was all we had. As the fog thickened, the world narrowed to the circle of light ahead and the shadows pressing in behind. The footsteps drew nearer, relentless and unyielding. We were trapped in a silent nightmare, caught between the spectral glow and the crushing darkness. And I realized then, the true horror was not what we saw, but what we could not see, the unknown waiting just beyond the mist, patient and hungry. The marsh was alive, and it was closing in. The fog clung thick around us, a heavy, suffocating blanket that swallowed sound and light alike. With each step, the marsh seemed to grow more alien, more hostile, as if it were a living entity watching us struggle through its grasp. I had long since stopped trusting the path beneath my feet. The reeds whispered secrets I could not understand, and the murmur of the marsh water was like a steady heartbeat of something ancient and restless. It was during one of those endless moments, when the world seemed to narrow to the dim glow of our lanterns and the hush of the mist, that I first saw it, a shadow detached from the natural order. At the edge of my vision, a dark shape slipped across the foggy path, gliding with a silence so profound it pressed against my chest. I blinked, and the shadow was gone, swallowed by the swirling vapor. I called out, voice low and urgent, but the others shook their heads, their faces taut with disbelief or denial. "It was nothing," Mark said gruffly, though even he looked unsettled. "Just a trick of the fog." But I knew better. The shadows were not tricks. Tom, who had been our bright spark, our laughter in the darkness, tried to lighten the mood with a joke. "Maybe the marsh wants to join us for the trip," he said, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. His joviality was a thin veil stretched tight over a growing fear that I could see etched into every line of his weathered face. Suddenly, a rustle to our left, a flicker of movement, tan Tom's smile vanished. He stared, frozen, as a dark figure seemed to materialize between the trees, only to dissolve into the mist when we lunged forward. "Did you see that?" he whispered, voice trembling. Sarah snapped a photograph, the flash briefly illuminating the empty space where the figure had been. "Nothing there," she muttered, but her hands shook as she checked the image. The shadows were growing bolder, slipping through the marsh like phantoms, unseen and yet undeniably present. Lena clutched her notebook tighter, eyes wide as she murmured, "This matches the tale's shadows that lead travelers astray, feeding on their fear." I felt a cold, not tighten in my stomach. The lantern's light ahead flickered erratically, as if responding to the unseen forces around us. Our footsteps echoed, but now they seemed hollow, fragmented, as though the marsh itself was mocking our presence. The group huddled closer, the fragile bonds of trust fraying under the weight of suspicion. Mark's skepticism wavered, his eyes darting anxiously as he muttered, "We need to keep moving. Staying still is worse." But the fog thickened, swallowing our voices and blurring the shapes of our companions. Every glance over a shoulder revealed shadows that were not cast by any of us, and every whispered step behind us was met with silence. I pulled my jacket tighter, the damp cold seeping into my bones, and wondered how much longer we could endure this creeping terror. Were the shadows merely tricks of the light, or the harbingers of something darker? And could we trust our own senses in a place where reality seemed to twist and unravel? The Lantern Man's lantern flickered again, its unnatural glow pulsing like a heartbeat, beckoning us deeper into the marsh's grasp. I swallowed hard, the weight of dread settling heavy in my chest. Somewhere beneath the fog, something watched us, waiting. "We're not alone," I whispered, voice barely audible over the growing silence. The marsh answered with a whisper of shadows, and the night stretched on, endless and unforgiving. As we pressed forward, the line between friend and foe blurred. Eyes darted suspiciously, voices lowered to hesitant murmurs, and the once unshakable solidarity began to crumble. Tom's laughter was gone, replaced by a haunted silence that spoke louder than words. The shadows among us were not just figments of the marsh, they were a reflection of our unraveling sanity. I could feel it, the trap closing around us, a web woven from fog and fear, spun by the lantern man's deceptive light. Each of us carried our own ghosts, but now the marsh held our souls in its cold embrace, and I was left wondering how many of us would emerge, and what pieces of ourselves we would lose in the darkness. The night was far from over, and the shadows were growing bolder. We were running out of time and trust. A sudden crack from the underbrush jolted us all. We froze, breath caught in throats, hearts pounding like tribal drums in the silence. The marsh was no longer just a setting. It was a presence, a living nightmare stalking us in the fog. "We have to keep moving," Mark urged, voice sharp despite the tremble beneath. But where to go when every direction was swallowed by mist and every shadow whispered threats? I swallowed my doubt and took a tentative step forward, the others following in uneasy silence. The lantern man's lantern flickered ahead, a cruel beacon in the night, and behind us, the shadows moved again. The fog was thick, a suffocating blanket that pressed against our skin and muffled every sound, save for the subtle, unstable flicker of a lantern's light ahead. We had stumbled into a clearing, but the familiar openness brought no relief, only a deeper sense of dread. That dim, wavering glow was no ordinary beacon. It was a pulse in the mist, alive and beckoning. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, each beat a frantic drum in the oppressive silence. Mark was beside me, his broad frame tense, eyes narrowed as he stared into the haze where the light danced. His usual bravado had slipped away, replaced by a cautious wariness I hadn't seen before. Then, as if the fog conspired to birth a nightmare, the figure emerged, tall, shadowy, unnatural. The lantern man stepped forward, a silhouette carved from darkness, his flickering lantern casting grotesque shadows that writhed and twisted around him like living things. The light wasn't warm or inviting. It was cold, spectral, a living pulse in the murky fog. It threw shapes across the marsh's skeletal trees, shapes that seemed to leer and leer at us with cruel amusement. Tom's easy smile vanished. Sarah's hands trembled as she raised her camera, desperate to capture proof of what we were seeing, or perhaps to anchor herself to reality. Lena's fingers tightened around her notebook, her eyes wide and unblinking. Mark muttered something under his breath, disbelief etched into his face. This isn't possible. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice as I spoke. It's real, Mark. We can't pretend anymore. The lantern man's steps were slow but deliberate, the soft scrape of unseen boots lost in the thick fog. Yet the atmosphere shifted with every movement. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The marsh around us felt alive, a creature breathing and watching. I stepped forward, trying to steady the group. Stay close. Don't let fear fracture us. But inside, I was trembling. The figure before us was no ghost story whispered around campfires. It was a living nightmare, a hunger wrapped in shadows and light. The lantern's glow seemed to pulse in time with my racing heart, promising salvation and damnation all at once. Mark's skepticism shattered like glass. His eyes darted nervously, searching for a natural explanation, but finding none. The supernatural was no longer a theory, it was our reality. The lantern man stopped just beyond reach, the fog swirling at his feet like smoke. His lantern flickered violently, casting a sickly glow that illuminated gaunt features beneath the shadow of a face half forgotten by time, twisted in eternal torment. A gasp escaped Tom's lips, the humor drained, replaced by raw terror. Sarah's camera clicked repeatedly, the flash briefly illuminating the ghastly figure, each burst a painful reminder that this was no illusion. Lena whispered a prayer or reply, couldn't tell which as she clutched her notebook to her chest. I took a deep breath, trying to summon the calm that had carried me this far. We don't have to let it win. We have to keep moving. But the lantern man's lantern flickered again, and the mist thickened, swallowing the edges of the clearing, enclosing us in a cage of shadow and light. There was no turning back now. The marsh had revealed its true face, and we were trapped within its deadly embrace. The night was far from over, and the terror had only just begun. The clearing remained silent, save for the faint, rhythmic flicker of the lantern man's flame. Each pulse was like a heartbeat, echoing in the stillness, a grim reminder of the hunter's presence. Mark's face had paled. The skepticism that once propelled him now curdled into fear. "Evelyn," he said, voice low and shaky, What is that thing?" I looked at him, my own fear tempered by resolve. "It's the lantern man, the marsh's curse, and it's been waiting for us." Around us, shadows shifted unnaturally. The fog seemed to press closer, tendrils curling like fingers reaching for warmth. Tom moved beside me, his usual joviality extinguished but his protective instincts aflame. "We stick together," I said firmly, "no matter what." Sarah's camera clicked again, the flash momentarily illuminating the spectral figure's twisted facer, mask of sorrow and malice entwined. Claire's hand found Lena's, a silent gesture of solidarity. The lantern man's lantern flickered violently, and the air grew colder. It was as if the very essence of the marsh was converging on us, feeding on our dread. I swallowed hard, knowing that the path ahead was a descent into terror. But I wouldn't let the darkness claim us not without a fight. As the first tendrils of dawn began to threaten the horizon, the lantern man's shadow loomed larger than ever, a reminder that in this marshland, light was a lie and hope could be the deadliest trap of all. The marsh seemed alive, no more than alive. It was a breathing, twisting entity, shifting and warping beneath the suffocating cloak of fog that pressed down on us like a shroud. Each step we took felt like sinking further into a nightmare that had no end. No safety, only the flickering, deceptive glow of that damned lantern held high by the figure we had come to know as the Lantern Man. I led the way as best as I could, my voice steady but my heart pounding. The water was cold and thick around my ankles, and the reeds scraped at my arms, clutching like desperate hands. Behind me, the others followed, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes wide with a fear that I shared but dared not show. Mark was silent now, his usual bravado stripped away by the creeping dread that filled the air. Tom's usual jovial spirit was gone, replaced by a grim focus that spoke volumes about the toll this place was taking on us all. Lena and Claire walked close together, whispers barely audible over the soft squelch of our footsteps and the distant, haunting echo of something or someone moving behind us. I caught snippets of Lena's voice, laced with urgency and unease, as she recounted bits of the folklore she and Claire had been piecing together. The Lantern Man, Lena murmured, is not just a ghost story. Hayes, a lost soul, cursed to wander these marshes, bound by sorrow and betrayal. Claire nodded, her fingers trembling as she clutched a worn, leather-bound book. A man who vanished centuries ago, swallowed by the marsh itself. Some say he was a victim of his own greed, others that he was betrayed by those he trusted. But all agree his spirit is trapped, and he feeds on the fear of those foolish enough to follow his light. The weight of their words pressed on me like the fog itself. I glanced back, trying to pierce the grey veil for any sign of the footsteps we all heard, slow, deliberate, unrelenting. Each echo bounced off the twisted trees, a sinister rhythm that matched the quickening beat of my heart. Sarah was near the rear, her camera held ready, eyes darting nervously as she searched for anything to document proof. Perhaps that this nightmare was more than just a shared hallucination. Earlier, she had captured something on film that chilled me to my core, a fleeting shadow, unnatural and contorted, lurking just beyond the reach of the lantern's glow. I could still see the flash in her eyes, that momentary illumination revealing a face that belonged to no living man. "Keep moving," I urged, voice low but firm. "Don't stop. We have to trust that there's a way out, even if we don't see it yet." Mark grunted in acknowledgement, but the tight set of his jaw betrayed his growing despair. The injury he sustained earlier throbbed painfully, slowing him down, and I knew it was only a matter of time before exhaustion and fear overwhelmed his stubborn resolve. The marsh closed in around us, the landscape warping as if reality itself bent under the Lantern Man's will. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, roots snaking like serpents through the water. Shadows flickered and danced at the edges of our vision, teasing and tormenting. Every rustle of the reeds, every distant splash, set our nerves on edge. "Evelyn," Lena whispered urgently, "the lantern, it glows brighter when fear is high. It feeds on us." I swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic. "Then we have to starve it. Hold on to hope, stay together." But hope felt fragile here, like a candle flame flickering in a storm. The footsteps behind us grew louder, closer, yet still no figure emerged from the mist. It was as if the very fog conspired with the Lantern Man, a living veil hiding horrors just out of reach. Suddenly, Sarah's camera flashed again, a sharp burst of light cutting through the gloom. We all turned toward the sound, hearts pounding. For a heartbeat, the marsh revealed its secret. A shadowy figure towering above the twisted cypress, the lantern in his hand flickering wildly, casting eerie light on his elongated, featureless face. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the vision faded into the mist, leaving us gasping, terrified, and more determined than ever to escape this cursed place. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "We move now, fast but careful. We can't let it break us. Not here, not like this." The group nodded, fear sharpening into grim resolve. The marsh might have claimed many before us, but we were still alive for now. And as long as I drew breath, I would lead them through this nightmare, no matter what waited in the shadows. But the question that haunted me, as relentless and chilling as the footsteps echoing behind us, was whether any of us would make it out at all.